And welcome back to the Hot Lap. We are talking Oscar Piastri. Jaques Villeneuve has come out and said this man is a little bit too complacent. I don't know. Piastri at the beginning of the year, absolutely no way. Now, looking at the last few races, maybe Villeneuve does indeed have a point. So, as I mentioned, we are very much going to be talking about Piastri being complacent, ? And we're going to have a look at some of the evidence, etc., etc. But before we get into that, on this day in Formula 1 on the 2nd of November, going all the way back to 2008, this happened. Yes, it most certainly is, Glockers. Lewis Hamilton goes through Timo Glock, up the hill, through. And, well, to be fair, there is British bias here compared to poor Felipe Massa. Listen to Martin Brundle's voice. Here we go. He comes through and then drum roll. No, I don't care. It's Lewis Hamilton's first ever title victory. And that, sadly, Felipe Massa has that in the courts currently at the moment. But Lewis Hamilton, world champion. Now this is the bit here that really kills me. Not in a good way. And yeah, people might laugh at it, but look, this is Ferrari celebrating. This is Felipe Massa's dad celebrating. And the Ferrari guys go, no, McLaren, Lewis won. Look, and here's the realisation. It's heartbreaking. It is absolutely heartbreaking. And look, the McLaren are crying. They're interviewing. They're like, oh my gosh. Felipe Massa's probably being told now. There's Lewis Hamilton being told. It's kind of like reminds me of that whole James Hunt thing. He didn't know he won the title when he crossed in 1976 at Fuji. And then he got told eventually. It was great. What an absolutely brilliant title ending. You can take your Abu Dhabi controversial. Yeah, the guy got screwed 2021. That's absolutely in the bin. This is last lap, last corner even, the best ever title decided, bar none. Obviously, you can have your opinion. It's wrong. No, you can have your opinion. Anyway, moving on from Lewis Hamilton winning the 2008 World Champion to a guy that may well win the 2025 World Championship and more. Look back to happier times. This was the standings after the Dutch Grand Prix, when, if you remember, a certain Lando Norris's engine went kaboom. So Oscar Piastri on 309 points, Lando Norris on 275, and Max Verstappen on 205. Nearly 100 points down. I mean, imagine that. That is 100 points down. Now, fast forward a few races, and we get to this. First championship lead change in the last 5 rounds since 2012. But Lando Norris on 357. Piastri on 356. And oh, how the mighty have caught up with Max Verstappen on 321. How did we get from this to this? To this. Is it because of Piastri's complacency? At least that's something that Jaques Villeneuve would like you to believe. So let's get into it, shall we? Here is Piastri. So Oscar Piastri, the way Oscar Piastri lost the Formula 1 World Championship lead means he has grown complacent. To be fair, I actually had a tough time spelling that word. I had to Google it. But anyway, Jaques Villeneuve at least has suggested this. Now, as you know, Piastri led the standings for 15 consecutive rounds since taking that lead. His advantage reaching 34 points, as we've seen, over McLaren driver Lando Norris after the Dutch Grand Prix, after the kaboom. So since then, the Australian, he's made mistakes, yes. Big mistakes, yes. Lots of mistakes, not really. But they've got it right here. They say medical results, with Mexico making a 4th consecutive podium-less race. I think only Lewis Hamilton not having a Ferrari podium is potentially slightly more upset. Norris has snatched the lead away by 1 point with his really, really dominant performance in Mexico. And that was hailed as a sign of Britain's performance reaching Piastri's level. I think they've both been at the same level. But essentially, Villeneuve has said, you see it in every sport. And this is what he said on the Sky F1's podcast. He said, you have teams that will have an average season. You get closer and closer to the finals, to the playoffs, and suddenly they're the best team out there. Why? For what reason, says Villeneuve. He says they were average all season and teams have been winning every game. They collapse at that. It happens all the time. Yeah, yes, it does. The pressure does get to people. He said we didn't have an extremely fantastic Lando early in the season. I think for the first couple of races. He says not the Lando we had at the end of last year. That I would agree with. That was a Lando that wasn't under that much pressure. However, pray tell, I will throw you Jaques Villeneuve, Abu Dhabi even, 2024, where he had to win that, because otherwise Ferrari may well have been the Constructors' World Champions. The McLaren at the time, the McLaren Constructors' Championship rested on his shoulders. He got a good start. He won. Well done. So, anyway, he said Lando didn't look that great at the beginning of the season. And we kept saying, oh, that's because, Piastri stepped up. He's now on Lando's pace and even quicker. And I think absolutely right. He was. Everyone was saying, surely Oscar Piastri, world champion. And after the whoops-a-daisy engine going at the Dutch Grand Prix, it was pretty much, okay, that's the world championship done on. See you next year. Wasn't the case, though, was it? Villeneuve goes on to say, but it was actually Piastri stepping but was it Piastri stepping up or Lando that just wasn't on it? He said he kept saying he wasn't very comfortable with the car, which is Lando, and maybe that made Piastri complacent. Villeneuve's words, not ours. He said when you all have to fight, all you have to do is fight your teammate, maybe you don't push to that last limit, that last tenth of a second. Interesting. He goes on, suddenly we get Baku, we get Max that's winning everything, yes, and Lando stepped up. Lando's driving faster and better than he's been all season. I think, yes, you could make an argument. Piastri is not stepping up. He was already at his limit. And when you do that, when you have to go the extra 2/10, Villeneuve says, suddenly you find problems in the cars that did not exist. He said, when you drive within the limit, the car's perfect, it's easy, you drive, you save your tyres. Think of Max 2023. Or at least McLaren at the beginning of the year. And suddenly, he says, you have to go to a couple of tenths faster. Obviously, you're going to have to find that limit. The nearer the limit you are, the nearer the edge you are. The nearer the edge you are, the closer you come to falling off. And Villeneuve says, you can't drive the car anymore. Everything is wrong. You don't know why. Because right now, we have the same car. It hasn't evolved that much, so there's no reason for it to be driven differently. Same tyres, same Pirellis. They do not change. Sometimes they're softer, sometimes they're not, Villeneuve says. The track is warmer and so on, but there isn't much of a big difference. So is it then all in Piastri's head? I do think once we labelled him as the Iceman is melting potentially, but Villeneuve goes on saying, so it takes your teammate to step up a little bit. And that's what Lando did. I think Lando did it. Piastri maybe hasn't yet. When almost the pressure was off. When the Dutch Grand Prix happened, the engine blew up. He was like, well, okay, I've kind of got nothing to lose, which is kind of the realms where Max Verstappen is. He's the underdog. No one expects him to win that world championship still. I think people, the non-believers, are thinking, can he? So I think in terms of that, he doesn't put himself under much pressure, which also means for Max Verstappen, he can absolutely send it, go for it, etc. Anyway, Villeneuve carries on saying it gets in your head and you just get slower and slower and you start inventing setups that don't exist. That's also, I think, coming very much from Jaques Villeneuve's experience. He was one of those people that did kind of invent setups, particularly at the British American racing team. As we know, in 1998, believe it or not, they didn't score a point. But I think Jaques Villeneuve drove better in 98 and 99 than he did in 97. Yes, he had crashes in 98, but he was exploring the limit, trying different setups. And I think that car, I'm not saying he outdrove the car, because I always say physically that's impossible, but he was putting that car in places that people were very, very surprised. Anyway, Villeneuve carries on by saying, you start doubting your way of driving. You look at the data and say, oh, my teammate is 1/10 quicker. I need to drive differently. And that's when it goes wrong. You have to remember what you were doing. That was good. Yeah, and I get it. You can't see the wood from the trees when it all starts going wrong. And maybe Piastri is doing these bizarre setups or setups he's not comfortable with. Now, to some extent, Villeneuve's analysis is corroborated by Piastri's own Mexican Grand Prix drive. The McLaren driver explaining that he did indeed experiment with his driving style. Piastri said, we certainly tried a lot of things. I felt like I started at the back of a lot of cars. I felt like I stared at the back. I stared at the back of a lot of cars as well. And he's saying, so it was difficult to get a read on what I was changing in my driving, working well or not. And that's pretty much exactly what Jaques Villeneuve was saying a few seconds ago. So, I mean, there we go. When we look at it, is this Piastri absolutely losing it? Even Günther Steiner's come out former TP Gunther Steiner, technical director, of Haas. Papaya rules broke Oscar Piastri, he says. What I would conclude is that Piastri isn't getting enough support from the team. And this is obviously different from what Jack is saying. He said he starts winning races, puts himself in a position where he can become champion. Everything seemed to be going well for him. Then suddenly Papaya rules came in. I think that broke him. And he's talking, and obviously we've got the picture of, we said that was a slow pit stop. The pit stop with the Monza thing. No, would it break him? No, I don't think it broke him. Would it distract him? Absolutely it would. But I don't think so. I'm sorry, Gunther. I have to disagree, sadly. But this is the top 3. And as I said, there is a world we are living where Max Verstappen will become the 2025 world champion. If you believe in parallel universes, is this one of them? I don't know. I still think it's McLaren's to lose, both Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri. Max Verstappen shouldn't win it. And if he does win it, it will be, an absolutely amazing feat, and 2, something that I think both McLaren and Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri will never, ever live down. This could be their only chance of winning a world championship. Who would have guessed? After 2005 and 2006, the Alonso winning years, the best driver in the world that won. He was beaten by Lewis in 2007, and he never had another world championship. You just don't know, do you? Could this be Max Verstappen's last? Maybe. Who knows? We'll speak to you soon. If you made it to the end, please give us a subscribe. That'd be absolutely amazing. But until then, we will, as I mentioned, see you soon. Thank you very much for watching. But above all else, stay safe.